They told him he had won a date with his dream woman. What they didn't tell him was that the whole thing was a joke. But fate has a strange way of turning cruelty into destiny. This is the story of a mechanic with oil-stained hands, a billionaire's daughter with a broken heart, and a 3-year-old girl whose innocent words would change everything. Nathan Cole woke up every morning at 5:30, not because he had to, but because his mother needed her arthritis medication with breakfast, and he refused to let her struggle alone. At 68 years old, Margaret Cole had hands that trembled when she reached for her coffee cup. Her fingers, once nimble enough to sew quilts and braid her son's hair, now curled inward like winter branches. But every Sunday, without fail, she still baked cookies for the neighbors who had helped them through the hard years. Nathan was her only child. Her miracle, she called him, the boy who stayed when everyone else left. He was 30 years old now, and he had never traveled beyond the state of Ohio. His world was small. The auto repair garage he inherited from his Uncle Ray, the modest house behind it, and the handful of people he cared for without expecting anything in return. He wore the same clothes every day, a white button-up shirt, usually stained with grease no matter how hard he scrubbed, worn khaki pants softened by 100 washes, old sneakers that squeaked on wet pavement. He didn't own a smartphone. He brought the same ham sandwich to work in the same brown paper bag. He had never downloaded a dating app, never been to a restaurant that required reservations, and never once considered himself worthy of romance. But what Nathan lacked in worldly ambition, he made up for in quiet character. He fixed cars for single mothers at half price. He taught neighborhood kids how to change tires for free. Once he spent an entire weekend rebuilding an elderly veteran's truck and refused any payment. "My uncle served too," he had said simply. "This one's for him." The community respected Nathan Cole, but they also pitied him. To them, he was a relic of a different time. A good man, yes, but a man who would grow old alone in that little house behind the garage, invisible to a world that had moved on without him. The young men from the insurance office across town found Nathan amusing. They stopped by his garage during lunch breaks, watching him work, trading jokes at his expense. His outdated clothes, his cluelessness about technology, his gentle, trusting nature that seemed almost foolish in a world full of sharp edges. Derek Hammond was their leader, 26 years old with an MBA and a corner office he hadn't earned. He had climbed the corporate ladder by stepping on others, and he found particular pleasure in mocking those he considered beneath him. One afternoon, leaning against a shiny sedan that cost more than Nathan made in a year, Derek had an idea. "Let's set him up on a blind date," he said, grinning. "Create a fake contest. Workers' appreciation. Blind date. Tell him he won dinner at Maison Lumiere with a mystery woman." The others shifted uncomfortably. "Isn't that kind of cruel?" Derek shrugged. "It's hilarious. We'll get some girl to show up, take one look at him, and walk out. Can you imagine his face?" They printed a fake certificate on expensive paper, gold borders, official-looking seals. They presented it to Nathan the next day with straight faces and rehearsed congratulations. And Nathan, trusting, hopeful Nathan, believed every word. That evening, he told his mother about it. Margaret sat in her worn armchair, her arthritic fingers wrapped around a cup of chamomile tea. The lamp beside her cast warm shadows across her weathered face as she listened. "A blind date," she repeated slowly. "And you believe it's real?" Nathan shifted his weight. Why would anyone lie about something like that? Margaret studied her son, this man who had given his entire life to others, who had never asked for anything, who still believed, despite everything, that people were good. She wanted to warn him. Something felt wrong, but she also saw the tiny spark of hope in his eyes, a spark she hadn't seen in years, and she couldn't bring herself to extinguish it. She reached out and took his calloused hand in her trembling one. "Then go," she said softly. But remember, Nathan, the right person will see your heart, not your clothes. If she can't see that, she was never meant for you. Maison Lumiere was everything Nathan was not. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, casting rainbow prisms across white tablecloths. Waiters in black vests glided between tables like ghosts. The air smelled of expensive perfume and melted butter. The menu, when Nathan finally dared to open it, was written entirely in French. He sat at a small table by the window, his reflection staring back at him from the polished glass. He had worn his best clothes, the white button-up with a faint oil stain on the sleeve that he couldn't quite remove, khaki pants that were slightly too tight, old sneakers that squeaked against the marble floor. He looked like a man who had wandered into the wrong building, and he felt it too. 15 minutes passed. 20. The waiter refilled his water glass twice, each time with a look that bordered on pity. Then she arrived. The woman was tall and striking, dressed in designer heels and a dress that probably cost more than Nathan's truck. Her hair fell in perfect waves. Her makeup was flawless. She walked toward his table with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. She stopped. Her eyes traveled slowly from Nathan's face to his oil-stained sleeve, to his worn shoes, to the nervous sweat glistening on his forehead. She did not sit down. "I don't think you're the kind of man I was expecting." Her voice was cold, final, a door slamming shut. Then she turned on her heel and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble like a countdown to Nathan's humiliation. The restaurant fell silent. Every eye turned toward the man sitting alone at the window table. Whispers rippled through the room like wind through dry leaves. Someone laughed, a short, cruel sound that Nathan would remember for years. For 5 seconds, just 5, he sat frozen. His shoulders sank. His hands trembled against the white tablecloth. Everything he had feared, everything the world believed about him, seemed to crystallize in that single moment. He wasn't good enough. He never had been. He never would be. But then something shifted. Nathan Cole took a deep breath. He straightened his spine. He looked out the window at the city lights glittering in the darkness, and he made a choice. He would not run. He would not give them the satisfaction of watching him flee. When the waiter approached, Nathan looked up with quiet dignity. "I'll have the pepperoni pizza, please." The waiter blinked. "Sir?" "The pizza and a glass of water. I'm going to enjoy my dinner." He was halfway through his meal when he heard a small voice behind him. "Mommy, I like him. Can we sit with him?" Nathan turned slowly, certain he had misheard. A few feet away stood a woman holding the hand of a little girl. The child looked no older than 3, with soft brown curls and curious, sparkling eyes. She was pointing directly at Nathan. The woman beside her was beautiful in a quiet, understated way. Blonde hair curling past her shoulders, a simple cream-colored dress. But what caught Nathan's attention was her expression. Elegance layered over exhaustion, composure wrapped around something that looked like sadness. "I'm so sorry," the woman said quickly, her cheeks flushing. "She says exactly what she's thinking. I hope she didn't bother you." Nathan looked at the little girl, who was now bouncing on her heels and grinning at him like they were old friends. And for the first time that evening, he smiled. "Not at all. Actually, she kind of made my night." The woman hesitated. She glanced at her daughter, then at the empty chair across from Nathan. Something flickered in her eyes. A moment of recklessness she rarely allowed herself. "Would you mind if we joined you? Just for a bit?" Nathan could hardly believe what was happening. But he nodded. "Please." Nathan thought that was the end of his story. Another night alone. Another reminder that men like him didn't get fairy tales. But fate wasn't finished with him yet, because at that very moment, sitting down across from him, was a woman carrying her own invisible wounds, and a 3-year-old girl who had just done something no amount of money or status could buy. She had seen him, really seen him, and everything was about to change. The woman helped her daughter into the booth and settled across from Nathan. Up close, he noticed details he had missed before: the faint shadows under her eyes, the way her fingers tightened around her napkin, the practiced smile that didn't quite reach her gaze. "I'm Victoria," she said, extending her hand. "Nathan, Nathan Cole." The little girl leaned forward, elbows planted firmly on the table. "I like your shirt," she announced, pointing at the oil stain. Nathan chuckled. "Thanks. It's been through a lot." "What happened to it?" "I'm a mechanic. I fix cars. Sometimes the cars fight back." Her eyes went wide with wonder. "Do you fix rocket ships too?" "Only the small ones." Victoria laughed, a real laugh, unexpected and warm. And for a moment, the sadness in her eyes retreated. Nathan found himself wanting to hear that sound again. They talked for nearly an hour, and it surprised Nathan how easy it felt. Victoria asked about his work, his life, his family. She listened with genuine interest, not the polite half-attention he was used to from people who considered themselves above him. He told her about Uncle Ray, who had taught him everything about engines and integrity before cancer took him too soon. About his mother Margaret, who still baked cookies every Sunday despite hands that could barely hold a spoon. About the tool bench he had built from scrap metal when he was 16, which still stood in the corner of his garage. "It sounds like you've built a good life," Victoria said softly. Nathan shrugged. "It's small, but it's mine." "Small isn't the same as insignificant." Her voice carried weight, history, lessons learned the hard way. "Some of the biggest things in my life have felt completely empty." Nathan didn't push. He understood that some stories needed time to surface. Lily had taken a devoted liking to Nathan. She giggled when he made faces with his pizza crust. She asked endless questions about the grease under his fingernails. She declared that when she grew up, she wanted to fix rocket ships too. Nathan was laughing at something she said when the sound cut through the room. A gasp, sharp, terrified. At a nearby table, a little boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old, was clutching his throat. His face was turning red, then purple. His mother screamed his name. His father stood frozen, hands shaking, completely helpless. Chaos erupted. Waiters rushed over. Diners stood up, craning their necks. Someone shouted to call 911. Nathan was already moving. He crossed the restaurant in 3 long strides, his movements calm and deliberate. He placed a steady hand on the father's shoulder. "It's okay, I've got him." He positioned himself behind the boy, wrapped his arms around the child's small torso, and performed the Heimlich maneuver. 1 sharp compression, 2, 3. The boy coughed violently. A piece of food shot from his mouth. He gasped, sucking in air, and burst into tears. The mother collapsed against her son, sobbing with relief. The father gripped Nathan's hand, unable to speak. Applause broke out across the restaurant. Genuine, grateful applause. Nathan stood awkwardly for a moment. Then he simply nodded and walked back to his table like nothing had happened. Victoria was staring at him with an expression he couldn't name. "Where did you learn to do that?" "Community center, volunteer training. Figured it might come in handy someday." "Most people would have frozen." Nathan shrugged. "I just saw a kid who needed help." Victoria looked at him for a long moment, past the oil stain, past the worn shoes, past every surface detail the world used to measure worth. And something in her expression shifted. Victoria Sterling had spent years building walls around her heart: a failed marriage, a ruthless ex-husband, a father who saw her as an asset, not a daughter. She had convinced herself that love, real love, wasn't meant for people like her. But watching Nathan Cole save that little boy's life, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. She didn't know yet that her past was about to catch up with her, or that the man she was falling for would soon face the most powerful family in the state. And somehow, impossibly win. That night, after tucking Lily into bed, Victoria sat by the window of her luxury apartment and let the memories come. She was Victoria Sterling, only daughter of Richard Sterling, CEO of Sterling Motors, one of the largest automotive companies in the Midwest. Her childhood had been a carefully curated performance. The right schools, the right friends, the right achievements. Every decision made to protect the Sterling image. At 24, she married Bradley Ashworth, a hedge fund manager from a prominent Boston family. On paper, it was perfect. Two dynasties joining forces. In reality, it was a nightmare. Bradley didn't love Victoria. He loved the Sterling name, the Sterling money, the Sterling connections. He was charming at dinner parties and cruel behind closed doors. He criticized everything she did, controlled who she could see, made her feel invisible in her own home. When she discovered she was pregnant, Victoria hoped the baby might change things. It didn't. Bradley saw their daughter as an inconvenience. He missed the birth for a business conference in Miami. He never held Lily, never fed her, never once looked at her with anything resembling love. When Lily was 6 months old, Victoria found evidence of Bradley's affairs. Multiple women. Throughout their entire marriage, she filed for divorce. Bradley didn't fight for custody. He signed the papers without even asking to see his daughter one last time. The tabloids destroyed her. Sterling heiress can't keep a husband. Poor little rich girl. They painted her as spoiled, naive, damaged. They didn't see the therapy sessions, the sleepless nights, the way she flinched whenever someone raised their voice. Since then, Victoria had built walls so high, she sometimes forgot what was behind them. Until tonight. Until Nathan Cole. 3 days later, Victoria was driving Lily to preschool when her car made a terrible sound. Warning lights flashed. The engine sputtered. The car died in the middle of a busy intersection. Horns blared behind her. Lily started to cry. Victoria's heart pounded as she reached for her phone. Then she heard a knock on her window. Nathan Cole stood there, wiping his hands on a rag. His old pickup truck parked behind her. "Need some help?" Victoria laughed despite everything. "Are you following me?" "Just lucky, I guess." Before she could respond, the back door flew open. Lily scrambled out and ran toward Nathan with arms outstretched. "Grease superhero!" She threw herself against his legs, hugging him like he was family. Nathan laughed and crouched down to her level. "Hey there, sidekick. You keeping your mom safe?" Victoria watched them together, her guarded, traumatized daughter hugging this man she barely knew, and felt something crack open in her chest. Nathan fixed the car in minutes. A loose sensor cable, nothing serious. When Victoria reached for her wallet, he stopped her. "No charge, just glad I was here." Lily dug into her backpack and pulled out her sticker sheet. She carefully selected a shiny gold star and pressed it onto Nathan's shirt pocket. "This is your hope star," she said solemnly. "Good people should always have hope." Nathan's eyes glistened. He crouched down to Lily's level. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'm going to keep this forever." Victoria turned away, pretending to fix her purse. She didn't want him to see her cry. Word traveled fast. Within a week, Richard Sterling had heard everything. His daughter, the Sterling heiress, seen multiple times with a mechanic from the wrong side of town. Richard was not a man who tolerated surprises. He had built his empire through control and the ruthless elimination of threats. He loved Victoria in his own way, but he loved the Sterling legacy more. He ordered a full investigation into Nathan Cole. Within 48 hours, he had everything: address, employment history, financial records, even the name of the cemetery where Nathan's parents were buried. One afternoon, Richard's black Mercedes rolled into Nathan's garage. The older man stepped out, silver hair, tailored suit, cold eyes, and surveyed the premises with open disdain. "Nathan Cole." "Yes, sir." "I'm Richard Sterling, Victoria's father." Nathan set down his wrench slowly. I figured we'd meet eventually. Richard stepped closer. I'll be direct. I know men like you. You see someone like my daughter and think, here's my ticket up. That's not going to happen. Nathan met his gaze. With respect, sir, I've never thought of Victoria as a ticket to anything. You're out of your depth. Maybe, but that's for Victoria to decide, not you. Richard's jaw tightened. Walk away, Mr. Cole, while you still can. He turned and strode back to his car, leaving Nathan alone in the settling dust. But Richard wasn't Victoria's only problem. Bradley Ashworth had heard about her new relationship. For 3 years, he had ignored Victoria and Lily completely. No calls, no visits, no interest. Now, suddenly, he wanted back in. He showed up at Victoria's apartment unannounced, wearing a $3,000 suit and a practiced smile. Victoria, you look wonderful. What do you want, Bradley? I've been thinking about Lily, about us. Maybe we were too hasty. Victoria's blood ran cold. She knew exactly what this was. His ego couldn't handle that she had moved on with someone he considered beneath him. There is no us. There never really was. I'm her father. I have rights. You signed away your rights when you walked out of that hospital room without looking at her. Bradley stepped closer, his charm dissolving into threat. I could make this very difficult. Custody battles, character witnesses, powerful friends who would testify that you're unstable. The old fear rose in Victoria's chest, the fear she thought she had conquered. But then she thought of Nathan, his steadiness, his courage. She straightened her spine and looked Bradley directly in the eyes. Get out of my apartment, and if you come near me or my daughter again, I will bury you in court so deep your grandchildren will still be paying legal fees. Bradley blinked. This was not the Victoria he remembered. He left without another word. But Victoria knew this wasn't over. Victoria had faced down her ex-husband and survived. But the real battle was just beginning. Richard Sterling wasn't finished, and Nathan Cole was about to be tested in ways he never imagined. Not by powerful men who wanted to destroy him, but by the question every person must answer. Is love worth fighting for, even when the world says you don't deserve it? That evening, Nathan came home to find his mother waiting in the kitchen. Margaret sat at the small wooden table, a pot of soup simmering on the stove, her arthritic hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She had lived 68 years, buried a husband, raised a son alone. She knew how to read people the way some people read books. You met her father today, she said. Nathan slumped into the chair across from her. He wants me to walk away. And will you? Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am out of my depth. Victoria comes from a different world. Private jets and charity galas and people who've never worried about making rent. Margaret set down her cup. She rose slowly, her joints protesting, and walked to her son. Her trembling hands cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. Nathan Cole, you listen to me. Her voice was stronger than he had heard it in years. Your father was a factory worker. He had calluses on his hands and grease under his fingernails, just like you. And I loved him more than I've ever loved anyone in my life, not because of what he had, because of who he was. Mom, love doesn't care about bank accounts or fancy titles. It cares about character. And you, my son, have more character in your little finger than most men have in their entire bodies. Nathan's eyes glistened. What if I'm not enough for her? Margaret smiled, soft and fierce at once. Then let her decide that. But don't you dare walk away because some rich man in a suit told you to. Your uncle didn't raise a coward, and neither did I. The next morning, Nathan arrived at work to find Derek and his friends waiting. But they weren't alone. A small crowd had gathered. Someone had tipped off a local gossip blogger. Phone cameras were already recording. Derek stepped forward with a satisfied grin. Hey, everyone. Did you hear the news? Our friend Nathan here thinks he's dating Victoria Sterling, the billionaire's daughter. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Show them the video, someone called. Derek pulled out his phone. He played footage from the restaurant, clearly taken from another table. Nathan sitting alone, the woman walking away, his shoulders slumping in defeat. That's what happens when a grease monkey tries to play with the big dogs, Derek announced. He gets put back in his place. The laughter grew louder. More phones appeared. Nathan stood silent, his face burning, the humiliation washing over him in waves. Then a voice cut through the noise. That's enough. Victoria Sterling stepped out of her car. Lily was in her arms. Her heels clicked against the concrete as she walked directly toward Nathan. She set Lily down, took Nathan's oil-stained hand in hers, and turned to face the crowd. You want to know what happened that night? Her voice carried across the lot, clear and unwavering. This man was set up, humiliated, abandoned at a table in front of strangers. And do you know what he did? He stayed. He ordered a pizza. He refused to let your cruelty break him. She looked at Derek, who had stopped smiling. And then he saved a little boy's life, with calm hands and a steady heart, while everyone else panicked. She turned back to Nathan, her eyes soft but determined. This man has more courage, more kindness, and more integrity than anyone I've ever met. And I don't care if my father disapproves. I don't care what the world thinks. She paused. I love him. The crowd fell silent. Lily tugged on Nathan's sleeve and whispered loudly, I told you, Mommy. I told you I liked him. Across town, Richard Sterling sat in his office watching the viral video. His assistant had sent it with a nervous note. You should see this, sir. He watched it 3 times. He watched Victoria take Nathan's hand. He watched Lily wrap herself around the mechanic's legs. He watched his daughter smile in a way he hadn't seen since she was a teenager. And for the first time in decades, Richard Sterling questioned himself. He remembered his own father, a car salesman who worked 16-hour days, a man with rough hands and a good heart, who died with nothing but a small dealership and a good name. Richard had built an empire on that foundation, but somewhere along the way, he had forgotten what it was made of. Nathan Cole reminded him of his father. The next morning, Richard drove to the garage, not in his Mercedes, in his father's old Ford pickup, a truck he had kept for 40 years, restored and maintained with his own hands. Nathan saw him coming and tensed, preparing for another attack. But Richard simply extended his hand. I was wrong about you. Nathan hesitated. What changed? I watched my daughter choose you, and I realized something. Richard's voice was quieter than before, stripped of its coldness. She's never been wrong about the things that matter. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. Sterling Motors is launching a community initiative. Free car repairs for nurses, teachers, first responders, people who keep the world running but can't afford basic maintenance. He handed the folder to Nathan. I need someone to lead it, someone who knows the work and knows how to treat people with dignity. Nathan stared at the folder. You want me? I want the man my daughter loves. 6 months later, the Community Car Care program launched at a downtown community center. The room was filled with journalists, local officials, families from every walk of life. A banner stretched across the stage. Community Car Care, powered by Sterling Motors. Nathan stood near the podium in a new button-up shirt, still white, still simple, but crisp and clean. Victoria stood beside him, radiant in a blue dress. Lily held both their hands. Richard Sterling sat in the front row. For the first time anyone could remember, he was smiling. When Nathan stepped to the microphone, the room fell quiet. I'm not much for speeches, he began. I'm better with engines than words. But I want to say something. He looked at Victoria and Lily. 6 months ago, I was sitting alone in a fancy restaurant, wondering if I'd ever be enough. I was convinced that men like me didn't get happy endings, that kindness didn't count, that the world would always see the oil stains instead of the man. He touched the worn gold star still stuck to his shirt pocket. But then a 3-year-old girl walked up to me and said 4 words that changed my life. "I like him, Mommy." And her mother, against all odds, gave me a chance. His voice thickened with emotion. So this program isn't really about car repairs. It's about seeing people. The nurse working double shifts, the teacher spending her own money on supplies, the single mom trying to hold everything together. They deserve to be seen. They deserve hope. The room erupted in applause. After the event, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, Nathan, Victoria, and Lily walked out together. Richard followed a few steps behind, watching his family, his new, unexpected, perfect family. Lily tugged on Nathan's sleeve. "Do we get to eat pizza now?" Nathan laughed and scooped her into his arms. "Always." Victoria linked her arm through his. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not walking away. For fighting for us when everyone said you shouldn't." Nathan kissed her forehead gently. "I almost did walk away, but my mom told me something. She said love doesn't care about bank accounts or titles. It only cares about character." He looked at the faded gold star on his shirt. "And a very wise 3-year-old told me that good people should always have hope." He pulled them both closer, Victoria on one side, Lily on the other, and they walked toward the car together, silhouettes against the fading sunset. Behind them, Richard Sterling stood watching. A tear slid down his weathered cheek. "You were right, Dad," he whispered to a memory. "The best things in life can't be bought. They have to be earned." And so the mechanic with oil-stained hands found his fairy tale. Not because he was perfect, but because he was good. Not because he was powerful, but because he was kind. And in the end, that was enough. It was more than enough. If this story touched your heart, remember, the Hope Star isn't just a sticker. It's a reminder that good things come to those who keep believing, even when the world tells them they shouldn't. Stay kind, and always, always believe in second chances.